hands together for the late morning program.
I gotta get a new intro.
Who's your announcer? Is that Bhatta Bhavana?
No, it's a devotee from England.
Okay. I think all British devotees sound the same. So.
Oh, I think we're peaking.
Peaking?
Hello. Hey, everyone. It's Namras. This is the late morning program with yours truly. And haven't done this in a while, but we're doing this with my brother-in-law and my dear friend, Venkatta Bhatta. Bibidi,
hey,
how's it going?
It's going well.
Yeah.
It's great to be back. I was just, before we started rolling, just commenting on how surreal this is, because I think the last time I was here was, 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2018.
Like, equipment was different, the whole...
Look at my studio now. It's
studio,
like amazing.
You didn't really even have a studio.
Oh, sorry. Very nice.
Very nice, yeah.
So, what have you been up to since friggin' March? COVID hit us. I had a episode with Dina Bandhu, and it was like in February, and we were talking about COVID-19, and I was like, I don't think it's going to be that bad. Like, it's going to go away soon.
Isn't that wild?
6 months later, we're still at it.
I remember, probably mid-February, late February, and I remember kind of, in a very snarky way, thinking about all the people wearing masks.
Yeah.
I go to NYU part-time, and
that's right.
NYU is a really large East Asian community. There's a lot of Chinese students from China. And
right.
Given the fact that, everything started in Wuhan, as far as we know, there were a lot of students of Chinese origin and a lot of students directly from China who I think kind of were keyed in to how serious this thing is early on.
Yeah.
And I remember walking across campus being like, is it just me, or are there more students wearing masks? And I remember even telling Krishnungi, that's so weird. Why would you do that? And here we are. And this is one of the few times I'm not wearing my mask. It's just become such a part of who I am now.
Right.
And that's only in a matter of months. So yeah, totally hear you. It's it's surreal. It's bizarre. And it's where we are now.
Have you been coping with quarantine?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think I've been coping with it. In some ways, I don't want to make light of it, but in some ways, I feel like I'm thriving.
A lot of people say that.
Yeah, I
feel like that a little bit.
I've heard it's it's kind of gone on extrovert introvert lines.
Yeah.
And some people are surprised to find this out about myself. I think I was surprised to find this out about myself. But I really identify much more as an introvert than an extrovert. I think
right.
a lot of people assume because I do things like public speaking or giving classes or stuff like that, that and it's not like I don't dislike being around people. I don't feel uncomfortable. I'm definitely not shy.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, and I think someone explained it really nicely. I forget where this is from, but that the key question to ask is where do you get your nourishment?
Mm.
What feeds you, right?
Yeah.
And when I think about it that way, what nourishes me is not really being around too many people, not really being around people. It's really that kind of alone time, that downtime and all of that. So it was a little bit of a rough transition initially, but once I think, I kind of figured out what it was going to look like, it's been really great in some respects. I mean, I'm doing the whole Zoom thing, working from home, trying to stay in touch with students and friends and colleagues.
Because you do, for people who don't know, Venkatta, he's a chaplain at Princeton University, Hindu chaplain.
That's right.
So you counsel students and you meet with students, have Bhagavad Gita class.
Yeah.
What other things do you do?
It's a mix. It's a mix of what I would say is programmatic and pastoral. So there's hosting events, guest speakers, classes, things like that. But it's also just that one-on-one, which usually would be in person and often over over or tea or a meal or something like that.
Yeah.
So that we had to sort of, switch gears. But even that, I think through things like Zoom and just setting up FaceTime, Zoom, one-on-ones, I think we could make it work. It's not exactly the same thing, but it, it's been working pretty well. So I think in those respects, I'm feeling pretty good. Spiritually, I have to say, and I'm sure others, have expressed similar things where it's it's put a lot of things in perspective. It's given, it's given us a little bit of a kind of a shot in the arm and a boost as far as like recommitting to sadhana, recommitting to certain practices, not because we feel like we have to, but because like, gosh, this is like such like an opportunity
Totally.
to like get closer to Krishna in a way that feels really natural and organic and sweet and doesn't feel like artificial and institutional.
Yeah.
So that's been really amazing. I think like, I mean, if I can say so, I feel more connected to Krishna now than I have in a long time. I feel like my chanting is, you know, it's weird. We don't usually like talk about our chanting in a positive sense.
Yeah.
Like
it's always
usually
like something you're
it's like,
struggling
oh,
with.
man, I'm like, I suck at chanting. I'm such a bad chanter. Like I have no taste, right? And it's true in the sense of like we should be like critical and should strive to improve. And I think we should also celebrate like when things are working well. And not that I don't have like a long way to go, but I'm getting glimpses of like, oh, chanting actually can be a really sweet, like something like Satchidananda Swami, who's really become more and more of like a sort of a spiritual hero to me. Something he likes to say is like, or he likes to emphasize is our chanting, our sadhana in general, but especially our chanting is like this sweet, intimate, like one-on-one time with Krishna. It's like our time to be with Krishna and put everything else aside. And I feel like just trying to be a little conscious of that and being in this setting of quarantine where it's like a little bit easier to set everything aside, at least, you know, in the mornings or during that time, it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So I've been really like, I mean, I'm really, really grateful for that. In other ways, you know, we all have our challenges. I think one thing, if I'm being totally honest, that's like been quite challenging about this is there's a little bit of an information overload. There's like a content overload. It's amazing how many things.
Oh, are you talking about
online.
like lots of Zoom classes and stuff?
Zoom saturation?
Oh my gosh.
Heavy Zoom saturation.
Let me tell you, I can't handle that. You know, I'm already on the computer like X number of hours per day. I don't want to stay longer on the computer. You know, like devotees asking me like, come on, go, you got to attend this class and stuff. Like, I can't, man. I'm like
it's like I've had enough.
It's
like, I
too
need to turn
much.
the thing off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. I think part of it is like the sort of like just the intensity of like always being connected to our devices. And, you know, for most of us, work now means being glued to your computer.
It's horrible.
But I think there's also this other dimension where I have this theory that like ISKCON invented FOMO before like FOMO was a thing.
What do you mean?
I think it's like a thing in like kind of devotee culture, like ISKCON culture.
Oh,
it's just like,
yeah, I know what you're talking
We make
about.
ourselves feel so, and we make each other sometimes feel so shitty for like not being at something, right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, like you didn't attend that was the best class ever. Like
Yes.
of like the, you know, 786,000 classes that like Radhanath Swami ever gave. This one
Yeah, I
was
know.
the one that like if you weren't in it, like, you know, you're like missing out on the secret to Krishna consciousness. Like
right.
and I think sometimes, you know, obviously, like, I don't think we intentionally do that to put each other down or to make each other feel like pressured. I think sometimes it's coming from a place of just like enthusiasm to share, but it's been hard because it's like, you have to be at this, you have to tune into this. And sometimes there's like guilt that goes with not doing it. There's a feeling of like, am I missing out?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean about the FOMO piece. And then like, it's just, there's so much. There's so
I think,
much.
yeah, you know, when I look at it, I think like after this quarantine thing, my life has become like so much more simple. Like it's like I know what I have to do. Like I know I have to chant, I know I have to like hear, I know I have to read and stuff like that. And it's like that's all I have to do. There's not like it's not like it doesn't have to be so complicated. And I think I complicate it myself. Like you're saying, like so many classes and things like classes are great and all that stuff, but like let's just keep it for myself. I'd like to keep it simple. Like I have a certain sadhana that I do, and then I have my family duties and I have my duties to my job and things like that, and I have to like keep it so you have to learn how to cap it at some point. Like you gotta be careful, or else, like you said, it's gonna be like system overload.
Yeah And I think, you know, it's capping it. It's also like just practicing discernment. I think one of my favorite words over
Discernment.
the years
Good
has
word.
become discernment. I love this idea of discernment because I think it's so critical, right? Where it's just like, okay, I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to listen to this with a full heart, with my full attention. But also there are going to be times where I'm going to say, listen, this is great. This is amazing. Maybe I'll listen to it later. Maybe I won't. But I'm making this decision.
Yeah.
I think that requires discernment. I think it requires kind of knowing yourself and knowing like what is pushing yourself to maybe add something that is like spiritually nourishing.
Yeah.
And what is just like jumping on a bandwagon.
Switching gears here. So when you first came back in 2018, we were meant to talk about something
Yeah.
that we didn't really touch on at all.
Yeah.
And that was what is commonly called, I don't even, is it just the title of a Dandavats article? I don't know. The Hinduization of ISKCON. I don't even know where that came from.
Yeah.
But I wanted to touch on that a little bit. And I have a few people who I love, who are my friends and who I love to hear about what they have to say about this. You being one of them, Chaitanya Nanda being one of them, and a few others. But let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what is that? Where did that come from? And like, in today's day and age, in today's ISKCON, where does that fit in? And like, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. It's tough. I mean, before I'll try my best. I'll jump into it and we'll see where it goes.
I know don't put the filter. I know Krishangi's listening.
I'm married to the filter. Okay. I can't like not put the filter.
For those who don't know, Krishangi's my sister and she's like a very great devotee, I would say.
Krishangi is Nam's sister, my wife, and basically this really saintly person that encourages us to lean towards our best selves. Let's put it that way.
That's a good way.
That's a gracious way of putting it.
Yeah.
And sometimes Nam and I like to lean away from our best selves and get into a space of maybe having a little bit more fun with zingers and, controversy and kind of like digging in,
tongue in cheek,
down, and very tongue in cheek.
Yes.
I think with good intention, right? I don't
of course.
think we're like
Listen,
trying to be haters.
This podcast is all about real talk and real people. This is called the Victious thing. Real talk, real people, and real topics to talk about. Things that you're not going to hear in a class.
Yeah.
This is what we talk
That's
about.
a great way of putting it.
Yeah. So please.
Yeah.
And preface it as whatever you wanted to say. I don't want to interrupt you.
I think, no, and I'm glad and thank you for sort of, giving me the kind of the freedom to do that.
Sure.
It's complicated, and I think there's like lots of things that are meant by that. So I'm not sure if I can, like, I don't want to claim to like, to do justice to like the whole conversation. I think it's like an ongoing conversation.
Right.
And to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure what that term means. Part of my frustration is I don't even know what it means. I think it's become kind of like a buzzword, which I think is part of the problem, right? It's like, It's easy to just sort of talk about it as if it's a thing, without ever defining your terms, without actually like backing it up with anything, right? It's just sort of easier to just go, oh, Hinduization of ISKCON again, or there we go, or you know what I mean? Like, it's
if
sort of
I could
intellectually lazy or something.
Right. Let me say what I think it means.
Please.
Our temples, mostly in North America, are majority Indians.
Okay.
Indian people have joined in the sense of not coming to live in the temple, but have come to be devotees. And
I have to say, just for a second, like, just when you said that, for some reason, and this just shows you how like bizarre my mind is, when you said that, I suddenly had this image of like a bunch of Native American people like joining the local ISKCON temple. Cause like when I grew up, it was like Indians.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought you were going to say like that makes them second class because they didn't join the temple.
No, I am going to get there. But I just want to point out that like if we meant a bunch of Native Americans, like members of like the, like Cherokee tribe or something, this would be a very different conversation.
Right.
Go ahead.
Anyway, so then activities and things in ISKCON have a flavor of the people who have been the majority for the past 20 years? No, 15 years?
I don't know. Depends on who you ask, I guess.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So, the prasadam is spicy. The classes are sometimes in Indian language. And now you're making me nervous about saying Indian.
You can say Indian.
Indian languages, Indian, everything has kind of gotten a spin of Indian ISKCON.
Okay.
And so the older devotees have complained or are not happy with the food being spicy, or they're not being Western devotees or the people of the locality to join Krishna consciousness. And so there's this kind of tension.
Yeah.
Would you say that's right?
I think so, but I think, even there, and I think you did a great job of like sort of trying
Thank
to
you.
encapsulate it.
Thank you.
Even there, you see already just in trying to like articulate it, how problematic that is, right? Like what the hell is a local person, right? We're here in, by the way, for those who don't know, we're in northern New Jersey. What is this town called?
Montville.
Montville.
Yeah.
Not far from Parsippany.
Right.
Who's a local Parsippany resident, right? The local neighborhood itself has so many people of Indian origin.
Yes.
So if we're trying to be like ultra local,
People say that so much. We have to preach to the local people.
yeah, I think that God, that is such a problematic statement. Like literally every word.
Tell me why. Tell me why.
The only word I don't have a problem with in that sentence literally is the word the. Like, where do we start? We have to preach. Okay, let's get into what preaching is,
that's too funny.
right? And like why we have this imperative to do that. And like,
Yes.
if there's like, I'm hard pressed to find like a cringier word right now. Like in the, we're living in 2020. Do people want to be? Do you want to be preached at? Like, I don't. Let me tell you. Like, I honestly, maybe I'm over 40 now. Let's put it that way. Maybe I'm just getting like I'm turning into a cranky old man. I'm like losing patience for stuff, okay? One of the things I don't have patience for is people who preach to me or preach at me.
Yeah.
Whether it's religious, whether it's a political cause, whether it's, an ideology, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
Right? When I'm walking,
I don't think anyone would like it.
when I'm walking through, when I was, pre-COVID, but like when I would be commuting into New York and I would like be at, Port Authority or whatever.
Yeah.
And like someone would come up to me and ask me, do I want to like learn more about like Scientology or like Jehovah's? It's like, no, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not only do I not want to know more about that, but there's something that almost is like, and I'm not like, not that there weren't like really polite, beautiful, wonderful people doing that,
Yes.
but the whole like underlying kind of like feeling of like, we have the truth and we need to like give it to you and like put it on you, whatever. It's just like, I have an aversion to that. Right. And I'm sure some of your listeners maybe, are pushing back and disagreeing. That's fine. But I have an aversion to that. So if I have an aversion to that myself, why in the world would I want to subject someone else to that? Even if I feel like what I have and, what I've been blessed with and, the grace that I've received is amazing. And I want to share that, right? Sharing is a different thing.
That's what I was going to ask you. So does that make you not want to share it? No, it doesn't.
No, but it makes me want to think like a million times about how to share it.
Yes.
Right?
Good point.
And like there's this beautiful quote that's often attributed to Saint Francis of Assisi, that where he's, the quote goes, I've heard it attributed to different people, but let's say that Saint Francis version, it's go out and preach. In this case, the Christian gospel. Go out and preach. Use words if you must.
Oh, yes.
And I just love that idea.
That's so beautiful.
So if by preaching we mean sharing in terms of our own personal example, in terms of like sharing our hearts, of like what lights our hearts on fire, what lights us up, what gives us inspiration, with someone who's actually open to that, who's actually hearing it, who's actually hungering for it and asking us about it, beautiful, amazing, right? That to me is not preaching. That's like a heart-to-heart connection. That's so it's so intrinsic to who we are. But this idea of preach, anyway, I mean, we could go off on a whole thing, but but it's such a loaded, difficult word. So, right. So what was the sentence? Preach to the locals. So preach and then preach to, again, preach to, preach at, right?
Preach at,
it's like this kind of like directive, like targeting. The word the, I'm going to let go because I think that's the only decent word in that sentence. And then locals. What is a local? Who's a local?
Local means the people who have the white people.
Well, that's a subtext, right? I think it's a euphemism, right? Preach to the locals. In other words, preach.
It's totally a euphemism.
And so, but I would really push back, right? We live, again, maybe there's some places where the locals really are all white people, right? That itself is problematic for different reasons. And I don't know that we should be like feeding into that or legitimizing it, right? There's a reason why there's some areas that are like completely white, and they're not very good reasons. There's because people of color and others have been like kept out of those areas.
Right.
But even putting that aside, for most places that I think you and I are thinking of, like here in New Jersey and New York and LA, whatever, the locals is and should be a category that's very diverse, that's very mixed, and that should include people of Indian origin. Like, why wouldn't we want people of Indian origin to connect with a tradition that is so like inextricably tied to and rooted in the culture, the traditions, the history of the country that we now call India, or the region that we now call South Asia, if you want to even go broader.
Yeah.
It just seems weird to me. It seems artificial to say, well, that's not really like quote unquote preaching to the locals. But again, I think, you know, what we end up with is, I think the reason that there's statements like that is it's a more socially acceptable, euphemistic way of saying, go after the white folks. And I think that's what we need to like really investigate. Like, where does that come from?
I was just going to ask you that. Where does that come from?
We'll be right back after this commercial break. We're having some technical difficulties there. No, it's tough. It's an uncomfortable conversation where it comes from. I think it comes from a couple of different places, and I think you have to look at it in the context of history.
Hold on. Let's hold on for a second.
Yeah.
For those of people who are listening right now who don't know your background, give me in a few sentences when you joined, what you were doing, blah 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 blah. Because you could just be some Indian guy from Princeton, for all I know. But I respect your history as a devotee, as a you were part of ISKCON. Anyway, tell us a little bit in a few sentences.
So
your resume in spiritual life.
I am an Indian man from Princeton, New Jersey. Okay, so you like
just to give a background, because you can say so many things, and some people will be like, "Who the hell is this guy?"
Right.
So,
and which is fair.
Also,
like,
but
let people say that. That's okay.
Yes, let people say that. But I think when you say something, you being yourself, it gives a little bit of weight to it because of your background.
Sure.
I think so.
Okay. No, that's fair. So in a nutshell, and I know we talked more about this like extensively in the previous episode that we did together. In a nutshell, I'm a person of Indian origin, right? Born and raised in the United States, in New York specifically.
Yeah.
Born into a Hindu family, but we weren't like super religious growing up. I didn't really, we didn't have a particular guru sampradaya tradition we were connected to. Just sort of went to whichever temples were closest in a very like maybe a couple of times a year for like major festivals or something like that. And just to cut a long story short, when I was like in my sort of like early teenage years, for whatever reason, just became really like philosophically and spiritually inquisitive. Started exploring different spiritual traditions, teachings, teachers, kind of the almost like the stereotypical like seeker, except the stereotype I think most of us have is of like a white person doing that, and for me it was like
right.
I was this like Indian American kid, this brown skinned kid who felt very American, right, being born and raised in America, and I think that's part of the story is like just sort of trying to figure out like who am I culturally, who am I spiritually, all this stuff. But for me that meant doing a lot of spiritual exploration. And that spiritual exploration led me to a number of traditions, like within sort of, what we might like kind of casually call within like Hindu spiritual traditions, but also outside of it, and like looking at some like Christian mysticism and Sufism and, just a bunch of different things. And that search for me culminated in and led me to finding my own path in the practice of bhakti and Krishna bhakti, and specifically through the Hare Krishna movement or ISKCON. Even before ISKCON, actually got connected to a group of devotees that were sort of formally like a kind of an offshoot of ISKCON, and then kind of transitioned into ISKCON. I in 1998 took first initiation from my spiritual mentor, His Holiness Radhanath Swami, and kind of have been, I guess, trying to be a practicing devotee ever since. Professionally, my background is I was an attorney, and felt like, and again, we talked about this last time, so I don't be too repetitive, but felt kind of called to pursue more of a direct engagement with my spirituality. And so I resigned from my work in law and ended up going to work full time for ISKCON, for the communications ministry. And I served under a wonderful mentor named Anuttama Prabhu, and served as the director of communications for North America in a wonderful period of time where social media wasn't as crazy as it is, and so it was a very different. Communications looked and felt very different at that time.
Yeah,
but I was able to do some of that work, and then transitioned into chaplaincy, and specifically working full time as the Hindu chaplain at Princeton.
Nice.
Is that kind of what you had in mind?
That's perfect. Okay.
Let's
go back to what we were talking about.
Yeah. So that's my pedigree. That's why you folks should listen to me. I'm not just some random.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm not just a life member. but I should, that should be like my tagline. It should be like Vineet Chander, disgruntled life member. Like, I paid my $1,001 and I expect to stay in the 55th Street Temple.
$1,111.
Yes, lots of ones.
Yes.
I was promised a room in the 55th Street Temple and the Golden Temple in West Virginia, and a full set of books, which I'm still waiting for in the mail. And I'm just like sick and tired of being treated as a second-class citizen. And so now I'm like going on the, I'm doing a bunch of podcasts. I'm doing like Joe Rogan after you, just exposing. No,
Oh
anyway,
man, that's funny.
that's where I'm coming from. I'm not just like some random disgruntled brown guy. I'm a
random disgruntled life member guy. You are not that. Because if you were you were that, then we wouldn't care what you have to say.
Of course not. And I'd still donate every year to the Rath Yatra, so it doesn't. No,
right?
Okay. No, let's get back on track here.
Okay, let's get back on track.
I forgot what the
we were talking about my definition of the Hinduization of ISKCON.
Yes,
and
right.
so I said,
and that problematic notion, right, of like who is local. And,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, I don't want to sound too self-serving here, but since you asked for my like little, resume or bio,
yes.
I mean, like, where do I fit into that? I guess is so part of my issue with the sort of.
What do you mean? Where do you fit into that?
What I mean is like when there are arguments about or questions about, or when this sort of accusation is raised of like ISKCON becoming Hinduized,
right?
Like, what do you do with a story like mine? Like, am I part of the problem of Hinduization? Am I an exception to that? Like, I had this like,
me too,
what I consider like a kind of conversion experience.
Right.
I mean, I really, especially in those early years. I mean, I was in high school, right? But in those early years, the devotees that I felt most like that I had most in common with were like non-Indian, sort of young. I mean, this is also during the time of like the whole like Krishna core straight edge scene, right?
Right.
And I felt like, although we had very different stories and different backgrounds, but I felt like we both had a lot in common as far as being like spiritual seekers. Mm-hmm. And so for me, like my connection to ISKCON, my connection to Krishna consciousness, my connection to gurus, like my own Diksha guru or like Srila Prabhupada, to the previous acharyas, all of that has been in the vein of like, for me, it was like a very real experience of, I don't like the word conversion experience so much, but an experience of like discovering my own, spiritual path and finding a spiritual home here.
Right.
And part of my problem with the whole, Hinduization of ISKCON, or like the dismissal really is what I like, I hear when someone says Hinduization of ISKCON.
It's a good word.
It's like, it's very dismissive of my own spiritual experience. It's almost like saying like, oh, your story is like not like the real deal. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really count as much,
right? Because
you're not like a white skinned person who's like making the jump from like, being raised in this like Christian or Jewish household to like discovering bhakti. Like, that's what Prabhupada came here to do. It's like Prabhupada didn't come here to America for like this like Indian kid, in New York City. But
yes.
But then like, that's kind of like saying like my story, my experience doesn't count. You know what I mean? Or it like doesn't count enough.
That's so problematic.
I think so. Not only is it problematic like in an intellectual or academic sense, but it's deeply hurtful. I mean, if I'm being really honest, like you said, like, you wanted to keep it real, right? Like,
yeah.
When I can confession time, right? I can do a great job of like sort of intellectualizing things and making it seem like, well, like I'm just like poking at this because as academics, we need to like really look at this and problematize and whatever. But there's real emotion under there as well. And if I'm being real with myself and real with you and your millions of listeners, which feels a little scary and
It's not millions.
close to it. And I'm feeling kind of vulnerable right now. But the truth of the matter is like, it's been deeply, deeply hurtful. And it is emotionally charged,
Yeah.
Does that make me biased? Probably.
Yeah.
But I think we all have our biases. And for me, I just want to like, kind of say that out loud, that even if that's not the intention, for not just one or two or dozens or even hundreds, but maybe for thousands of us, right? It's like your stories don't count.
Yeah, exactly. That's thank you for being vulnerable and for saying that. Why else is it problematic?
Yeah.
Besides your own personal feeling, but why else for now, for the future, why else is that a problematic thing?
Yeah. Well, let me take a step back.
Sure.
I do want to acknowledge that like I think there's some truth to it. I think there is an important conversation or series of conversations that need to be had that is like, it's like sort of like the thesis behind the thesis, right? So I think what's being said is the Hinduization of ISKCON piece, which I feel like is misguided for these reasons that we've gotten into and we will get into. What I agree with or what I sympathize with is the underlying frustration. Is the sense of, I think like what Chaitanyananda might have been talking about in his podcast and others have talked about, like this idea of like mission drift, this idea of like, the kind of like anxiety around a tradition or even an organization or institution kind of like maybe, not going in the direction that it needs to be relevant.
Yeah.
Right. I can sympathize with that. I think those are important conversations to have. What I feel like the Hinduization of ISKCON kind of track, and here let me broaden it out, not just the use of the word Hinduization, but the sort of like framing everything in terms of like Indians and Westerners, right? Just as a side note, I mean, I know we were joking about it, but part of the reason why like the whole idea of Indians, like cowboys and Indians, even in our language, it's just like there's something that's very like almost like abrasive to me about like, we don't even say it's Indian people. You ever notice that? We're not even like Indian people, Indian folks, Indian devotees. It's just like Indians, like catch all, like, like imagine if we just replaced that with like blacks or Jews. It would sound so grating to our ears, right?
True.
Like,
it's true.
Like, oh, how was that program, Prabhu? It was good, but a bunch of blacks showed up. Like WTF, it's like, like, I feel like, like the Bhagavatam classes, there's just like too many Jews in the Bhagavatam class. Like we'd never say that, right? We shouldn't. Anyway, that's a side note. But even like in terms of our language, right? I think we've gotten really kind of like too desensitized to just like talking about things in what can be a really insensitive way. But anyway, to get back to this, like what I find problematic about it also is it's setting up this dichotomy of just like, there are two categories, basically. There's Indian and there's Westerner, right?
Yeah.
Both very loaded terms, both really hard to define. But there's Indian and Westerner. And like somehow the implication with the whole like Hinduization of ISKCON argument is we are going astray because of category A. So we need to somehow like fight against that. And depending where you're coming from, either that's ignore category A, de-emphasize category A, get rid of category A. I mean, you can get to some dark places, right?
Yeah.
But the problem, according to this narrative, is category A, and the solution is we need to lean into category B. I think that's problematic because I think it's overly simplistic and dangerously reductionistic, right? It takes a set of really complex issues, really difficult but important conversations, amazing opportunities for like critical reflection, for as an organization, as a community, for us to go like, hey, let's take a good hard look at ourselves and like see like what are we doing right, What are we not doing, as well as we can? What is our baggage, right? All this kind of real like introspection. It takes all of that and it sort of like replaces it with this, I think, oversimplified kind of dichotomy. And it's just like easy problem, easy solution, right? Problem is this Indianization, Hinduization. Therefore, the solution must be some kind of like, depending on how you look at it, either like a return to or a move to some kind of like westernization, right? And then we start, so like, okay, that's problematic because it's overly simplistic. And generally when things are overly simplistic, it is at the expense of engaging with the stuff that's really complex. So that's a loss, right? Because we lose the complexity. It's also problematic because it scapegoats an entire group of people that truly speaking actually have, like, not that, the Indian community or the Indian community of devotees, even within ISKCON, doesn't have its shortcomings and problems. Like, they're definitely there. I'll be the first to acknowledge and admit that.
Sure.
But to like basically for this community, this group, this identity to carry the burden of like ISKCON's failure, if you want to use that word, or like shortcomings.
Oh my gosh.
That's heavy, right?
So heavy.
And it's and I would really question, like, is that fair? Is it earned? Right? Like, that's like a problem with scapegoating in general, is like, it's not fair, right? It doesn't evenly and constructively share responsibility. It says those people over there, even if it's dressed up as, okay, we have nothing against, as I've heard, some devotees argue, no, it's not that we have anything against Indian people or Indians. It's Indian culture, or it's the food, right? So we find all these ways of dressing it up. Oh, it's the spicy prasadam. It's it's the fact that like saris are, then there's whole debates about like saris and dhotis and like, scholarship being done on like, how Vedic are saris, and do they wear saris in the spiritual, and all this stuff that, okay, fine, it's kind of like interesting to think about, but as far as I've experienced, is often just a way of kind of masking the scapegoating thing. So, okay, problem one, it is overly simplistic. Problem two, and feel free to push back, by the way. This is not like
no.
I'm
I'm taking it in. I'm taking it because this is you're saying a lot of things that I've been thinking, but I haven't actually said out loud, like to myself. So I'm just like absorbing what you're saying, and I do have things to say, but continue reviewing.
So, I mean, and this is also just helping me to think it out loud too,
right?
Because this is just stuff that's like swimming in there.
This is great. I love this.
Simplistic at the expense of the complexity. So that's a problem. Scapegoating. So that's a problem. A third problem, which is kind of similar to the first one, but I think like it feels, and I think it rings really, really superficial. And so we end up having these conversations, like extended conversations about the clothes you wear, for instance, right? And here, I mean, I don't want to like venture too far into like, sort of tricky waters, and I don't want to offend anyone. We're all trying in our own ways, respect. But there is a sub-community that's developed. I'm not going to say it by name, but it rhymes with Kanye West. We can. I've been working.
Oh, wait.
I just want to be honest. I've been working on that joke for like 2.5 weeks in the lead up. No. Anyway, we don't have to get into specifics, but there's kind of developed this little, I don't know how little, but this sort of subculture within the kind of,
I think it's tiny, to be
ISKCON
honest.
world. But it's like as I've experienced it, at least, it can really fixate on things like the clothes that you wear and the kind of food that's served, or like the musical instrument that you use.
Yeah, people are not joining Krishna consciousness in North America because of X, Y, and Z.
Right.
All those things being Indian things.
Right. And so again, the solution is, or I guess the implication, that's suggested is that the solution is, if we switch over from, as I've heard it expressed, I'm not trying to be like too snarky here, but like if we switch over from like dhotis to like dockers, to like khakis, and I'll come back to that in a second. Please remind me to come back to the khakis, because it's not like That's not an accidental reference. I think there's something else going on there. But like when we switch over to like khakis and polos and baseball caps and, you know, whatever, and, you know, like pianos and guitars,
peanut butter and jelly
sandwiches instead of, right? When we do that, then it's like problem solved. Suddenly we're going to be relevant to people. People are, as you said, the sort of the argument, sometimes literally this is the argument that's made. People are not joining, whatever that means anymore. Again, because we're not asking these.
To question everything about the language now.
Yes, I do work for like an ultra liberal, like Ivy League institution. So like everything is questioned and you know, deconstructed, right? So fine, guilty as charged. But the point is like the point, Nam, is like we're not actually even asking ourselves like we're not stopping and going, what in the world does it even mean to join? Like, how would I even know it if I saw it? Does it mean moving in? Does it mean like getting initiated? Does it mean chanting a certain number? Like, what does it even mean?
Yeah. What does it mean?
But rather than have that conversation, it's like the fixation is on like, if we fix the clothes, if we fix the clothes, if we fix the food, if we fix this, that, the aesthetic, right? And we like, this is not what they're saying. This is what I'm saying now. If we like whitewash the whole thing,
do separate program for another day.
Do a separate program.
Yes.
Right. So the whole like, you know, separate but equal.
All the Indians will come on Sunday. All the whites will come on
Friday or whatever. Right. Like, it's great. It's great. You know.
Yeah.
I don't know when the blacks and Jews will show up.
I don't know.
I don't know if we do a program for the gays.
Oh my God, no, definitely not.
Anyway.
No, in a sense, I'm saying definitely not because of the conservative viewers of ISKCON. Yeah,
but here's the thing, right? So, oh gosh, there's so much to do here. There's so many ways.
Let's stay. I know. There's so many places we can go. Let's stay on.
Let me stay on this track. Okay, thank you for Okay, the problem, or one problem I find with that, is it really kind of distracts us. Not only does it oversimplify the problem, but it causes us to take our eyes off of the real deal. Okay. I'm going to ask you to indulge me for a second. I know you are going to get this. I know some of your listeners are going to get this. There's going to be a bunch of your listeners that are going to like miss this reference. Okay.
Okay.
So in advance.
Is it a Simpsons reference?
It is a Simpsons reference. I'm going to make the Simpsons reference in advance. If you're not a Simpsons fan, especially like an old school Simpsons fan, apologies.
Have you heard of Krishna consciousness?
This part is a crazy man.
Beautiful. That's one of many Hare Krishna references. Do you know there was a couple of Hare Krishna?
Yeah, I know there was a few.
That's probably my favorite one though.
Yeah.
But this is not one of the Hare Krishna references, but I think it's so, for me, it so encapsulates what you know, what I feel like is at the heart of this like Kanye West issue.
Okay.
Right? So there's an episode where Lisa is, and this is like one of the early episodes, where Lisa and all the other like kids of Springfield have been waiting for the Malibu Stacy, the company that makes Malibu Stacy, the kind of their version of Barbie, right?
Yeah.
To release the talking Malibu Stacy doll. And like Lisa is like I've been waiting for her to speak like all my life. And she goes out like the day that the talking Malibu Stacy comes out, and she buys the doll, and it's like a string or something. She pulls a string, and Malibu Stacy says all these problematic, like misogynistic, sexist things, like math is hard. Let's get the boys to do it,
right?
You know, stuff like that. I don't remember all the, but it's like if you're a Simpsons fan, you'll get it. It's like hilariously misogynistic, like, you know, and Lisa is crushed, right? So she's upset, she becomes angry, and what she does, and I'm going to truncate like the episode, right? So I'm not going to go into the details, but what she does is she brilliantly seeks out like the founder, like the Stacy behind Malibu Stacy, and she convinces this woman who is like, you know, this elderly woman now who's like a recluse. She convinces her to work with Lisa to create their own doll, their own talking doll that will say all the things that they want, you know, young girls to hear and to internalize, right? They will create this like feminist role model doll, this empowering doll. And they do it. They create this amazing doll that says this like empowering, intelligent stuff. And they name it, I think, Lisa Lionhearted. Mm-hmm. And they get like the anchorman, Kent Brockman.
Kent Brockman, yeah.
Kent Brockman. They get Kent Brockman to do a story on it.
Yeah.
So now Springfield is abuzz because the Lisa Lionheart doll is going to come out, and is going to say all of these things that, that Malibu Stacy is not saying.
Yeah.
And the Malibu Stacy folks get wind of it and they get nervous. And so on the day that Lisa Lionheart is to be released at the toy stores, a new Malibu Stacy is released. That's exactly the same as the old Malibu Stacy, but now has a hat on. And every little kid in Springfield, like as they're running to the Lisa Lionheart exhibit, they're like, look, Malibu Stacy, she has a hat now. And they all run and they all buy Malibu Stacy with a hat.
Oh my God.
So why in the world am I bringing this up?
Yes.
Right? To me, this whole, like, whether it's Krishna West, whether it's whatever, but this idea of like switching up the dhoti for the khakis, it's like the same ISKCON with a hat on. Quite literally, because sometimes there's like a make ISKCON great again baseball cap. I don't know if they actually have one like that, but like a Krishna West baseball cap or something. But it's like quite literally, it's ISKCON as an institution. And I know there's not just one monolithic reality of ISKCON. I know it's a complicated thing.
Yeah.
But ISKCON as an institution, as a community, when we buy into that sort of like the problem is the dress, the problem is the food, the problem is all this superficial stuff, it's like saying, well, we can just put a new hat on it and problem solved. It's not really like digging into like, well, what is ISKCON saying when I pull the string?
Right.
Metaphorically, right?
Wow.
And that's problematic enough, but like when, as a result of that, the Lisa Lionheart doll never gets heard.
Yeah.
Right. So in other words, when there are real conversations that are happening. Most of them are happening behind the scenes in private spaces among really thoughtful, intelligent devotees who are trying to like get at, what does it mean for Krishna consciousness, for bhakti to be relevant, to be resonant, to touch people's hearts? What's standing in the way of that? Where do we have to really look at things that we do, whether they're particular practices, whether they're the way that we have, taken certain philosophical concepts and we've like weaponized them. Like, where are we missing the mark? Where are we hitting the mark? So we can, let's not just beat up on ourselves. Let's honestly like celebrate what we're doing right. But let's also take some let's take those really hard looks at like where are we missing the mark? And let's be courageous enough to address that, even if it means, bumping up against some sacred cows in ISKCON, right? Like, it's not going to be comfortable. There are going to be people who are like very threatened by that. There are going to be devotees who are like, whoa, this is not like in my day, especially, and some of it gets generational. I'm not trying to like paint, all Prabhupada disciples or all older devotees with one brush. So pardon the generalization, but there is there's something generational at work also, which is hard to talk about.
I was gonna, let me cut in for there.
Yeah,
I heard growing up, many senior devotees and many gurus speak about that when they come to a certain temple that's all Indian. Like when they sit down, like their arrival address is like, where are all the Westerners and stuff? And like hearing that as growing up, I was like, okay, yeah, we need to preach to Westerners. But as I'm growing up, I'm thinking like there's something, I have like a problem with that a little bit. And it's hard for me to explain because it's such a part of me. Like even how I was explaining the Hinduization of ISKCON to you, I saw the problems in what I was saying to you while I was saying them.
Yeah.
Like I never thought of it like that. Like the language, the different points that I was making, that's just like, hold on a second. That's just, I don't know. I also find it very hurtful. The whole Krishna West thing has been just like, it's just really hurtful that like, we just want to erase everything Indian and then the people will join Krishna consciousness. Yeah. Like, no, that's not going to work. What is going to make people join is when people actually have bhakti, like pure bhakti. That's what, attracts people. And that's what changes people's hearts, relationships and like community and things like that. Not like superficial things. So, I don't exactly know what I was going with that, but
I think, that this question, and I hear you, right? Where like when like an older, because we were talking about generational.
Oh, that's right. Generational.
So
when
an older devotee, like a Prabhupada disciple or a guru or a leader, a sannyasi, whatever, who tend to be, older devotees, although not exclusively now. When someone like that asks a question, and I've been in situations like that. I've been in situations where people I consider my own, respected guides, mentors, gurus, lowercase g gurus, when they've said things like that, I'm interested in the question behind the question, so when someone says, when someone asks that, I think it is a good question to ask, but I don't think we should stop at it just asking the question, where are the Westerners? Let's ask the question, like, where is everybody? Why is it that, like, ISKCON has been around as an institution for, formally at least, in an incorporated state for a little more than 50 years.
Yeah.
Again, in many ways, like ISKCON has done a great job. I should say we, because I also, whether I like it or not, for better or for worse, I'm connected to this organization, although I have come to a place where I don't feel like I can speak on behalf of the institution, or I don't align necessarily on everything with the institution, but it's my family. I'm part of this family, right? For better or for worse.
Right.
We all need to ask ourselves, like, okay, where is everyone? Yes, where are the Westerners? Where are white-skinned people? Where are black-skinned people? Where are brown folk? Where are queer folk? Where are men, women? Like, how balanced, how diverse? Like, everyone should be asking this. Princeton University should be asking this question, right?
Yeah.
Your workplace, whatever, I don't know, whatever evil corporation you work for these days. I don't know where you work, Nam.
I don't want to say it publicly.
Yeah, you shouldn't. You shouldn't.
Yeah.
Right.
Check me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, right. I probably shouldn't have said Princeton. I should make it clear I'm only speaking on behalf of myself and not Princeton University here.
Yes.
But like any of these institutions, we should hold all of them to the fire, so to speak, to be like, look, it is the year 2020. Like, we all like need to move past like tired excuses. And particularly if we're talking about institutions and organizations that aim to be for everyone, like that needs to be reflected, right? So diversity, inclusion, equity, like those things need to be reflected. So I think the question of like, where are the Westerners can be a really constructive question if it takes us to a place of greater diversity, greater inclusion, greater equity. If it takes us to a place of, again, we're too much in category A, we need to, what word did you use? Not reject, but anyway, I'm forgetting the exact word, but like we need to sort of like get rid of as fast as we can category A stuff, right? We need to shed category A stuff to get category B. That's when I feel like it starts to get problematic. And not just problematic, but again, I mean, just trying to get more like into that real, like, where's that coming from emotionally? I think it brings up a lot of, I think ISKCON as an institution is also battling a lot of wonky stuff around self-identity and around our own discomfort with like who we are. And I think that's part of it too.
What do you mean by discomfort by who we are?
Yeah, it's like, this sort of like this desire to jettison, I think is the word. Maybe I was thinking, but like, yeah, to just shed, to jettison all of this, like kind of like the Indianness. Sometimes it's coming, there's like intellectual arguments that are made, right? Like, oh, like, do we really need saris and dhotis? Do we really need like sabjis instead of pasta or whatever, right? But sometimes I feel like, or I feel like what maybe like, a couple of layers beneath the surface, there also seems to be this sense of like, I'm not like, this stuff makes me feel weird. It makes me feel like it's hard to explain to the, to like my white neighbor or to like my coworker.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to contextualize it. It makes me feel embarrassed. Right. It reminds me a little bit of like when I was growing up. I was, like I said, I was born and raised in New York. My parents both, my mom actually came, my mom came to America first. She came in 1968. So to New York, like right around the time, like,
dang,
it's pretty,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. She came as on a nursing, they were doing this thing with, especially with India and I think like the Philippines and elsewhere, with like nurses and nursing students, where they would like bring over nurses from these other countries, right?
Like visas and all that stuff.
Yeah. So it was it was like a thing, you know. So my mom, even before she was married, she and her best friend and then her sister, my late aunt, they all came over as these nurses, and they were like in like the counterculture 1960s, like it was, you know, it's like a wild time.
Wow.
I mean, they weren't hippies or anything, but like they were like, you know, they were part of that experience, right? Of coming west. My you know, my mom went back to India, married my dad, and then they both came back in 73. So like they very much had that immigrant experience. They always, like, for my parents, and to this day I think it's true, like for them India is always home, right? For me, I didn't know where home was, right? Because America was all I knew. Like I grew up in America. I thought in English. I like considered myself American. I remember like the first time like a kid in school like suggested to me I wasn't like American. I was like, what? Like I thought I was just like white, but like I had a really cool tan year round or something. Like I really thought. I distinctly remember actually, because it was like something like race was an issue in like one of like the elections, and I remember we were like talking about it in some like elementary school like social studies unit or something, and I remember coming home and being like are we white? I remember asking my parents like, are we white? Because it was just like,
wow.
But I had this, you know, so anyway, I'm you know, going off on a little bit of a tangent, but like the point is like I had this experience growing up where my parents like kind of knew a little bit more like solidly, like they were Indian. They happened to be living in America, right? But they were Indian.
Yeah.
For me, it was a little bit more complicated, and I had both of these parts to me. And what made it even, I think, more difficult was like everything, and you know, keep in mind this is like the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Everything in school, everything in like popular culture, right? What was normal was white culture, like American culture, but really like other than like the Cosby Show or something, it was really like white American culture, right? There was very little exposure to anything else. So to me, American, you know, like if I were to like write it out, it would be like American equals cool, acceptable, normal, successful, not weird, not embarrassing, and white. I mean, I might not have, you know, consciously thought that or articulated it, but like that's what I like, you know, like when I grew up watching a lot of TV. When I'd watch these sitcoms and I'd be like, oh, I want to be like one of these sitcom families. It's like low key, like I couldn't, because my family just doesn't look like that. We don't talk like that. Like we don't, like, you know, like it's just not the case, right? Like, like no matter how hard I tried, like I couldn't be like, you know, DJ Tanner from Full House or whatever, right?
DJ Tanner.
But in ways without even like consciously realizing it, what I was doing, I think, was internalizing a lot of like, I internalized a lot of self-doubt and even self-shame, right? Because if that's normal, then what I am and what goes on in my household is abnormal.
Yeah.
Then the food we eat is weird. And the smells that come, you know, that linger in our home, or maybe get on my clothes, and then people are like, oh, like, you know, you smell like curry. Like that's all weird. And not only is it weird, it's hurtful. And I don't have, like, I can't respond. I have no comeback and be like, yeah, well, you smell like
bread.
Yeah. Like you know, you smell like Ritz crackers. Like, because like, you know, I had internalized like, we're weird, they're normal.
Yeah.
So part of it was like, I like hardly ever invited friends over. Because even my house like looked weird, and like how would I explain that like weird thing of Ganesha, or like, you know, or the fact that even like we took our shoes off, like something as simple as that, like we took our shoes off before going inside. Like a lot of like most of my like white friends didn't do that. On TV shows, they never did that. Everyone was like wearing their sneakers all the time. Like they like jumped out of bed. They wore robes. We never wore like bathrobes. Like I tried to get my mom to buy me a bathrobe one Christmas. Like I celebrate Christmas, by the way, which is a whole other, like, right? Like
I do as well.
So, but it's part of like negotiating this thing. Anyway, like.
So what does this have to do?
Yeah. Thank
You're
you
going
for
to
asking
connect
that
it.
question.
Yes.
So what does that have to do? Like, I can't help but feel like sometimes when I hear this talk in ISKCON, that like, it's like a version of like of like I hear like shades of like, 10-year-old me. Where
Interesting.
it's like, okay, like ISKCON's like our family, our home, and there's like a lot of like weird stuff that like we can't explain too well, and that we may not like be equipped with the tools, the language, the resources to like to help contextualize it and articulate it. So it's like easier to just like try to get rid of it the way like before I would have like a friend come over, like the one or two times I did, I'd be like super paranoid and would try to like scrub my house of like anything Indian and like get my mom to like not cook and like whatever, right?
Close the curtains.
Close the curtain in front of the deities or whatever, right? Like
Yes.
I'm sure you can relate to this.
Oh,
like,
totally. 100%.
right? Like, or like, it's like, I forgot who it was. Maybe you'll remember with like, maybe it was like Gopika Kanta or someone is like friends coming over and like her parents are doing like Tulsi Puja. And she's
gosh.
like, what? Like how? Like they're like walking around a freaking plant. Like sometimes the plant is wearing a skirt. You're like, what is going on?
man.
Right? So I can't help but feel like sometimes the whole move to like, okay, like let's just solve the problem by like sanitizing and scrubbing ISKCON or Krishna consciousness or Bhakti or whatever, right? Because it can even get broader than just ISKCON. Like, let's just scrub it of all that Indian stuff so that we can just like be normal and white like everyone else.
Yeah.
Without even like realizing you're doing it, right? And I'm not like pointing the finger at anyone in particular. I want to like be very clear about that because and Krishnangi helped me to see this. Like it's very easy for me to tear down others. I may do that myself in so many ways.
Yeah.
But like collectively, like that may be a little bit of what's happening. And especially when that then becomes like a movement within the movement, you can like philosophically justify it. You can write papers to defend it. You can like do like, posts on like social media and not even realize that like, hey, like, why am I just buying into this notion that like white equals normal? So remember I said I wanted to get back to khakis?
Yeah.
This is, I think, where things like the khakis and polo shirts come in. Because if you look at it, right, and I know this may not be everyone, but for some of the devotees making this like kind of like case for like a Western friendly aesthetic
Yeah.
of, and I'm trying to be like very diplomatic with my words because I don't want to like, kind of like skew the description, but like when devotees talk about kind of creating this like this aesthetic that is going to be more like relevant, contemporary, Western aesthetic, if you notice so often what that aesthetic is that aesthetic is a very white aesthetic. When you think of like, it's like, even like think about clothes, right? That kind of like, that particular aesthetic, and I'm not knocking it, I actually dress like that quite often myself.
Yeah.
But like the polo shirt, the like, the khakis, the dockers, whatever, it's a very kind of like preppy, affluent, successful white person way of dressing, right? Like it's not, that's not to say anyone else like is barred from dressing that way. Like you can dress however you want to dress. I certainly do. Like
Zach Morris.
I dress like Zach Morris.
No. I'm just saying isn't that like the...
Because I'm getting like I'm getting a little sensitive now because I've been told my my COVID haircut is like very Zach Morris right now. Like I'm like going back to Saved by the Bell.
I'm not saying that you're dressed like Zach Morris. I'm saying Zach. When I hear preppy,
You think
didn't
like
someone call him preppy?
Slater used to AC Slater.
AC Slater, yeah.
Which, by the way, like when you're in ISKCON, it's hard to say AC Slater without thinking AC Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So this is like the world we have to like balance this, right? We've got like these different influences. Anyway, but like you see what I'm saying, right? Like when we investigate a little bit deeper, it's not just, and this is part of why I really push back against this. It's not just saying like, hey, let's not be we're chasing people away or we're like turning people off because we're too Indian. It's sort of it's saying we're too Indian and that's keeping us from being white enough. We got to make ourselves white enough.
Yeah.
That's creepy to me, right? It's creepy to me like when you and again this is going to sound kind of harsh, but with due respect, when I think it was probably back in like 2016, I think it was right after Trump got elected, in fact. Do you remember like the Charlottesville white supremacy like rallies? Do you remember this?
I don't know.
I know there's like so much crazy stuff has happened that like even things that were like
I can't keep track.
in any other time in like history, we'd be like, that was crazy. I'm gonna remember that for the rest of my life. Now it's just like one of many crazy things. But back in I think it was 2016, they're all kind of blurring to me. There was like this like alt-right organized like, you know, neoconservative, like sort of white supremacist, you know, pro-Confederacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, march. And it was in Charlottesville, Virginia, ostensibly around things like, you know, protecting Southern heritage, Confederate heritage, not taking down Confederate, you know, statues of Confederate generals and the Confederate flag but they were like screaming things like, we will not be erased. And then they were like screaming like Jews, you will not replace us. Like crazy, like stuff you would not think would happen in your lifetime. Like I thought like Nazis was something that like that previous generation, you know, fought like a world war to like deal with. But it turns out like
it's there.
Still a thing. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing it up is if you look at like their aesthetic, just in terms of the way they were dressed, it was like pretty frightening because you had this sort of like uniform of like this kind of like preppy look of like these bunch of these guys in like kind of like form-fitting, you know, button downs and polos and khakis and kind of marching with these tiki torches, you know, these tiki torches.
Wow.
And it's like, I'm not trying to say that like, you know, folks within Krishna consciousness who kind of support like wearing like Western clothes, you know, I'm not trying to equate that. But what I am trying to suggest is like these things matter, and they matter on this deep, sometimes even subliminal level where it's like, let's not kid ourselves and think like there's not like deeply troubling implications, even to things like our dress. And again, I say this as someone that, as you can see, I don't know if people can tell, like, you know, on the counter, but like I'm very comfortable wearing, like this is usually how I dress. This is very often how I dress, you know, pre-quarantine, how I would dress going to a temple, sometimes even to, you know, like a program with like my spiritual master, with other great Vaishnavas. Like I have no, for me, it's just like a non-issue. Like I feel comfortable like this, so I dress like this. I've never, ever gotten anything but 100% acceptance, you know, love and appreciation from devotees who I look up to and I trust, regardless of like whether I'm wearing, you know, a shirt and you know, jeans or a dhoti and kurta or whatever, right? So to me, it's like such a non-issue.
Yeah.
But when it becomes an issue either way, I think we need to dig deeper and go like, what's going on there, right? Like, it's all fine and well to say like we shouldn't have to wear Indian clothes to be devotees. I 100% agree with that, right? Like, by no means should that be like a requirement.
But when you turn it into a philosophy or not a philosophy, but when you turn it into like a strategy.
Yeah. And when that becomes the focus.
Yeah.
And that becomes like, I would even say the fixation.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This may be a little controversial, right? But anyway, the ship has sailed on that, right?
You definitely don't have to preface anything anymore.
Okay. So I had this conversation with a devotee who has very strong feelings about this sort of thing, and very kind of pro non-Indian clothes, pro like, you know, this kind of like preppy uniform.
Right.
And he was making this point that when we go out on Harinam, when devotees go out on Harinam and they're chanting in the streets, that it's very off-putting and weird when they're like wearing these like saris and dhotis and like, you know, these like, here comes these like Hare Krishnas and like bed sheets and robes and whatever, right? But it's so attractive and wonderful when they're like wearing like khakis and, you know, a shirt, and I don't know what the women, you know, are supposed to wear, which is also an interesting thing. This whole, like, it's a very male-centered, you know, subculture from what I've noticed.
Right.
But, you know, it was interesting because he said that and I like pushed back, because to me, it's like sort of like, first of all, I think it's like equally, if not more weird, right? Like if I see a procession of people coming down the street, like sort of like randomly like singing and like dancing and like pulling me up to like dance with them and like
And they're just wearing the same clothes as you.
but they're all wearing like either the same clothes as me or the same clothes as like each other. Like they all just like they all just got out of the same like Abercrombie or like J. Crew like sample sale or whatever. Like it's just like weird to me. Like it's weirder to me. You know what I mean? Like yeah, it's like welcome, come like chant and dance with us. We're Americans just like you. See, we all have matching khakis. Like, you're telling me that's not culty? Like, that's 100% culty.
Right.
Like, it may be 100%, it may be culty in dhotis and saris also. But like, and here's where it maybe gets a little too controversial for some listeners, respect. But like, I want to push the envelope a little bit further. Why only have a conversation about like what the people are wearing on Harinam? Where's the conversation about like, does going out on Harinam the way that, you know, has traditionally been done in ISKCON from, you know, I don't know what the date is for the first Harinam, but let's say from like the, you know, late 1960s. Does that even still make sense?
I think it does, and I completely disagree with you.
Okay, fair. But let's have a conversation about it.
Let's do it.
I mean, we can do it right now, but my point is,
we
let's
can
have a conversation about it, right?
Yeah.
My point is, that's the conversation that I wish it were safer to have, and I wish that conversation were happening more, and I wish there was more of an acknowledgement of, A, does this activity still work? Does it still resonate? If so, how does it work? How does it not work? How did it work, you know, in 1975, and how does that same activity in now 20 or 2021, how should we maybe think about adjusting or evolving or developing?
100% agreed.
My point, Nam, is not necessarily that you have to agree with me that, you know, maybe it's time to like hang up our you know,
cartels and
cartels. I realize that's like kind of like for some people that's like a, you know, way out there opinion. And it may not necessarily even be what I 100% believe either.
Right.
But my point is, why is that conversation not the front and center conversation? Why is the front and center conversation, you know, dhoti versus pants?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
And I don't want to get too far field, but like that's what I mean about this whole like, you know, Malibu Stacy with the hat on, right? It's like, where's the conversation about what is relevant and what is a turnoff? Not because it's Indian or Western, but because maybe it's culty. Maybe it feels too high pressure. Maybe it feels, maybe it's too us against them, right? All these different things. Where's the conversation about what is in our practices, in our cultures, what is there that is, even without us intending it, that is communicating disrespect for others? What is communicating misogyny or sexism? What is communicating racism? You know, casual or otherwise.
One point I want to make is that when you were saying how, like when you were growing up, you thought things that were normal equals American equals like, you know, white and all those things that you thought were normal. The way I look at it now is that I am excessively like, I don't care because I was like that as a child and
Sure.
as a teenager. Like if I have to go to the store and I have a dhoti and tilak and kurtan, Tulsi wants me to go to the store, like I will purposely keep all those clothes on and go to the store and be like, yes, this is me. What?
Yeah.
That translates into my ISKCON experience as well, in the sense of when you say, you know, Harinams, is that the right thing to do? And I've heard other senior devotees speak like that, and I immediately become like, this is us. Like this is us, and what? Like we will affect people via the pure holy name and Krishna consciousness, regardless of how we look and all this stuff. And I'm okay with being weird. Like I just wanted to like make that clear. Like I'm okay with being weird because I was so not okay with being weird when I was a kid. You know, It's like kind of going in the whole other. It's kind of going the whole other side of the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I'm
Do you know
glad
what I'm saying?
I know exactly. Yeah, 100%. And I feel like that really resonates with my own experience. For me, I think it was like maybe when I was probably like college, maybe even a little bit after college, that I really, yeah, like I came to own that stuff. And then it was like, and there are theorists, there's whole like developmental theories, there's race theories, there's theories that talk about how this is actually what tends to happen. That there's like, you go from sort of being like deeply embarrassed and wanting to like get rid of that stuff to like this sort of like, yeah, and what? Like, I'm like loud and proud, right? Like,
Exactly.
like in queer theory, there's like a lot of stuff that like this is part of the process of coming out. I think for us, it's kind of a coming out, right? It's like I'm coming out. I'm coming out of the Krishna closet or the Hindu closet or the the Indian, the brown skin, whatever. Like we all have our closets.
Yeah.
I think that's very much like a healthy trajectory. I think that's what happens. I think here's where maybe I'm taking some liberties, right? But here's where I feel like let's extend that to ISKCON, not just individual ISKCON members, but let's extend that to like ISKCON as like a collective. I would love to see ISKCON, like I think just as it was for you and I and Gopika, Kanta, and others who have shared stories like this, it was sort of like a natural part of our growing pains to go through that, like we got to get rid of the weird stuff, like that phase, if we want to use the word phase. The phase itself is not such a big deal. The problem is that I think if we got stuck in that phase, for us, I'm grateful that we were able to grow out of that phase into a healthier space of, maybe first into this like, yeah, loud and proud, like deal with it, going out of my way to be like, what? Like, look at me. I'm like, wear like the huge tuning fork tilak and like be like, yes, like wear my like, like, hi, my name is Venkatta, ask me about Krishna sticker or whatever, right? Like I'm gonna like, I'm gonna like fly the flag, right? Maybe for some of us, like that's where we land up. I think for many of us, that is also a necessary part of the journey. If we want to like mix metaphors, maybe that's like the pendulum swinging back to this other side. And then hopefully you find this space where it's sort of like as with maturity, it's kind of like, okay, like I found this way to like reconcile these things and to be, and I keep coming back to these phrases, like to be more comfortable in my own skin. Like that takes time. And it takes, I think, some sense of like healthy integration and balance. And for ISKCON collectively, I would love to see the sort of the ISKCON collective, Gaudiya Vaishnav family, whatever, Bhakti family. And I know those terms are not entirely interchangeable, but like however broad or specific you want to be. But I would love to see these communities kind of go through these different phases and this different growth. But also to move towards more and more integration rather than just like pendulum swinging. And it's just like quick fix solution here. We got to go all Western, quick fix solution there. We got to go all Vedic, right? Sometimes you see like dudes like wearing like wooden shoes and like it's a bit much. You know what I mean? Like it may not be the most practical if you're going to wear like wooden shoes everywhere. And you're like, a grahasta with like 3 kids and you like, like work a job, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'm poking fun, but the point is like, there are these extremes, and there'll always be like, we always have a colorful cast of characters, right? There are always going to be these like outlier folks that like kind of revel in being like the odd man out, the extreme. Yeah. But I love the idea of collectively redefining normal for ourselves, not on the basis of like normal equals white or normal equals Vedic or normal, but like normal equals being comfortable in my skin. It equals integration. It equals balance. That's where maybe more work needs to be done. And maybe, that's where we need to head. And I don't want to make too much. I know I can be a little cutesy with the analogy, but if you think about it, right? Like when I was growing up, the language that we used was, folks like myself and you too, right? We were like ABCDs.
ABCDs, yeah.
And for those who don't know, ABCD stands for American Born Confused Desi.
That's right. Desi means Indian.
Yeah. Did you know the history of ABCD? You know how that term came to be?
Wasn't there a movie?
Before the movie even. So the movie kind of picked up on the
That was a great movie.
I remember watching that movie actually.
Did we watch it together? Green Card Fever.
We watched one of those movies together.
So good. I love those movies.
Um,
Anyway, you were saying the origin of that.
but the origin of the term, and this is kind of before your time, and maybe even a little bit before my time.
Yeah.
But the origin of the term is really interesting because ABCD was a reaction, and it was a reaction to, from what I understand, it was a reaction to folks that would later be called ABCDs, kind of using this like not so nice slur, kind of this like racist slur against people who were like straight from India. And the term for them, very, problematic term, was fresh off the boat.
Fob, yeah.
Or FOB, fob.
Fobs.
So, the fobs, the so-called fobs, they got sick and tired of being picked on. And they're like, if we're fobs, then you guys are
ABCDs.
ABCDs.
Wow.
No, what's interesting is both of those terms, especially ABCD, maybe fob to a lesser extent, but both of those were sort of reclaimed, and like the pejorative was like the edge was kind of taken off. So now it's
Really?
like kind of. I mean, with ABCD, by the time I started using it, it wasn't like such a it wasn't such a put down. I mean, like my cousins were like, oh, you were such an ABCD, and then I just like whatever, like, like yeah, maybe I am, but like the confused part, like, and the truth is, we were kind of confused, right?
Yes, for sure.
So not to make too much of the analogy, but if you think about it, right? What's my story? My story is I have these immigrant parents. They come off, in their case, planes. They step off the plane. They're like strangers in a new land, and they make this new life, and they have me and my sister in America. And so we're American born, right? We were not from India, but we were totally from India.
Yeah.
When people would be like, where are you from? It's like, I'm from New York. No, where are you really from? Right. And even if we're honest with ourselves, is like, we know we're like from India in a way.
Yeah.
Right. But we also know in another way, we're really not from India. Like India's home, but it's not home. It's like all this stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And it's confused.
Such a mix.
Okay. Prabhupada comes to the West, literally steps off a boat. So he's literally, no disrespect, he's literally fresh off the boat. In this case, the boat is the Jaladuta.
Right.
And what does he do? He starts ISKCON. So again, at the risk of being too cutesy about it, what is ISKCON? ISKCON, in one sense, is an American-born, right? ISKCON was incorporated in New York City, if you see the incorporation papers, as an American-born child of this, in one sense, you can say this, great soul, this transcendent master, and all that's true, but it's also true that transcendent master, great soul, eternal devotee of Krishna, etc., 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 was also, according to a certain angle of vision, was also, an elderly Bengali gentleman from India.
Right.
Right. So ISKCON, in one sense, is kind of like this ABCD. It has this ABCD experience, and I think part of it is like sort of going through this like self-doubt, self-shame, trying to figure out your identity. Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons that I felt kind of drawn to ISKCON, in one sense, if I'm being honest, is like I think I probably either consciously or subconsciously saw a lot of myself in this, because it's like the same wacky East-West blend that sometimes works, sometimes feels like a tension, sometimes is like going back and forth, a little schizophrenic, but it felt very resonant. I remember when I first became like friends with Guru Kulis, it was so weird. I don't know if you had this experience, but I felt like we had shared this experience, but like from two totally different sides. It was almost like, when you see like the negative of a picture, like everything is like reversed, but it's like the same thing.
Yes.
It was like this experience. That's powerful, I think. And even though it can feel uncomfortable, I think if we can learn to see it, it's an amazing opportunity. I think it's an amazing, amazing opportunity. Tamal Krishna Maharaj, before he passed away, as part of his later in life, academic journey, when he was a student, as you might know, he was a student first at Southern Methodist University, and he finished his undergrad, he did his master's, was I think valedictorian or something. He was like amazing.
Yeah.
Right. He was brilliant, brilliant person. Then went to Cambridge and was doing his PhD, did his PhD.
He finished it?
I
think he was just about to finish, publish his paper or something.
I think his
Dissertation.
advisors helped to sort of polish the rough edges around his dissertation. Then it was published as an amazing book called A Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti. Highly recommend that book. But in an earlier book called A Hare Krishna at Southern Methodist University,
Love that book.
there's an essay, there's a chapter in that book called Being Hindu in North America. I mean, it's very interesting because he, without much issue, is very comfortable using the language of Hindu and Hindu American, which itself is pretty, I think, pretty telling. But he talks in that essay. It's one of my favorite things that I think I've ever read by anyone.
Really?
It just speaks to me so much. But he writes in that essay about how this was like written in the late 90s, mid-late 90s. So in some ways really ahead of his time even. But he writes about how the second and third generation of Hindu Americans, that's the generation that ISKCON has the most to offer to and that have the most to offer to ISKCON. I'm getting kind of chills even talking about it because it's like, who talks about that?
No one does.
But like, it's such a brilliant, to me, insight. And that's not to discount anyone else. It's not to say, other ethnicities, other generations, other groups don't have a lot to contribute. But he really zeroed in on this and he wrote about it. I'm not going to do it justice, but he wrote about it so beautifully about how these are two sort of cultural phenomena that can really understand each other.
Wow, it's like a molding of two.
It's like this meeting of kind of long lost siblings or long lost cousins.
Right.
Like that's exciting to me. That's inspiring to me. That's encouraging to me. And and again, not to harp on it too much, we can move on. But the Kanye West, Krishna West stuff, that to my vision doesn't take us to that place that Tamal Krishna Maharaj is like prophesizing about. That takes us farther away from that, takes us more into this like unhelpful categories that are unhelpful for the reasons that I've tried to share.
Yeah.
But that also, frankly speaking, and very personally speaking, that I don't relate to, that I don't feel like accurately represent me. Like I feel invisible when I hear Western and Indian as two rigid categories.
100%.
I'm like, okay, well, I guess there's no category for me because I'm neither this nor that.
Yeah.
And what Tamal Krishna Maharaj points out in this essay is Hindu Americans are both this and that.
Wow, he said that?
He said that in that essay.
What year was that?
I want to say, I'm not sure the essay because the book was published, after the particular essays.
Right.
I want to say the book was published in 97 or 98.
Oh my God. That's so way before its time.
Yeah, I think so.
I really resonate with that, with what you're saying about feeling invisible in that regard. I don't know if you read Burke Rockford's book about Hare Krishnas in
Transformed.
America. Yeah.
Well, he's got Hare Krishnas in America, which was like his sort of original groundbreaking study, which I don't remember the date on it, but I'm guessing like the 80s.
Yeah.
Late
70s.
But I think his field work was like in the 70s, and then he
Right, the
published
field
in
work,
the early 80s.
Yeah.
But the one that you're referring to is probably the more recent
The more recent one, like early 2000s. For those who don't know, Burke Rockford is a professor in the University of Vermont, I think. He basically studied ISKCON like as an academic. Amazing person. Like he came in, he gave class at the Bhakti Center when I was living there, pre Bhakti Center, and he was talking about like ISKCON, and I was flipping through his book and stuff, and he doesn't really like. He basically says that, okay, ISKCON's changing, but he doesn't kind of like acknowledge our generation at all.
Yeah.
And I was really wondering about that. I think me and one other person wrote to him because we were talking about this exact same thing. And we were writing to him like, where are we in this picture? Like, we're not Indian and we're not Western. Like we're this kind of hybrid. You could say hybrid.
I think hybrid's a great word for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess my argument would be, I don't know if first of all, I just like totally have the same question. And that's as much as I think there's a lot to appreciate about Dr. Rockford's work. That is a major shortcoming to me. And that's one of the reasons why, as much as I appreciate it, I also feel like, it doesn't really speak to me the way that, other even academic work has spoken to me. but to your, just before I lose this train of thought, like I love the word hybrid actually, and I guess my argument would be that ISKCON itself is a hybrid, and so that's the Tamal Krishna Maharaj point, that like when hybrids meet hybrids and kind of see themselves and resonate and empathize and sympathize with one another, like amazing possibilities become real, become actualized.
This is actually a very groundbreaking point that I don't think anyone is addressing in ISKCON North America right now at all. Like, I think more than attracting people, we're actually like detracting people. Is that a word?
It is. I'm not sure.
De-attracting?
Yeah, huh? Disattracting?
Unattracting?
Misattracting? Unattracting?
Like that.
You should have like a Alexa or Siri or
no,
something.
I got a Google right here, homie.
Right. No, but I like calling out to like Alexa.
Oh yeah.
When I was like, I don't remember what year it was, but I remember like early on in my Krishna conscious journey, so to speak. I remember maybe it was Gaur Govinda Swami or someone gave a class. Someone was giving a class who was like a real like kind of guru profile figure. Yeah. Like in a cool way. Like I was digging it. And the person, let's say it's Gaur Govinda Maharaj, just for the sake of the story. I'm not sure it was, but let's just say. Yeah. But the guru Gaur Govinda Maharaj was like, he was saying something and he spoke a word. I don't remember what the word is, but he spoke the word and then he said, "What is the definition of this word?" And like immediately he had like they were like disciples like whipping out like dictionaries and they were looking it up and they were like, da 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 da, like. Yeah. And I remember like watching this and going, like being in the audience and just being like, that's so cool. Like, I want to do that. And now I feel like, I guess on some level, I was like, I want to be a guru one day. So like, I can do that. Right. And like now I'm like 42. I'm like not a guru. I'm pretty sure I'm not like on the list, like probably not. It's like, like,
oh, sorry.
There's
not a guru.
I was waiting for you to bust out that sound effect. No, there was there's probably like the Diksha guru list, the female Diksha guru list, and then like way down here there's like the you want to talk about Venkatta list, like, but I found like I can like live out my like guru fantasy now because we have like an echo, an echo dot,
Yes.
And so like from across the room, like I can be like sitting in like my easy chair, and then from across the room I can be like, Alexa, what is the definition of so and so? And like she has to tell me because she's like my like. No,
we should make a devotee Alexa, like who listens to lectures, and then when the speaker's like, so what is that? Like you're thinking, you say the translation.
Like, what is that verse?
What is that verse?
And then like she like I
love that. I love it when I'm in a Jared Wittemarge class and he's like, what is that? And I'm like, oh, I know that verse. And I say it. And he's like, yes, that is the verse.
Yeah.
I feel so good about myself.
I love that too. The one time it happened to me. like, bro, I have no memory for verses.
I love verses.
I'm always the guy asking, what is that verse?
Yeah.
Sometimes I ask, okay, not sometimes. I admit like once or twice, like I've asked it, even though I knew what the verse is, just to kind of say, just to be like one of those people who could be like, what is that verse?
Yes.
And then I can like, anyway.
So unattract, so ward off, force off, brush off, hold back, keep away, repel, repulse.
Repulse. That's a strong.
So what my point is, no, it's too strong. But what my point is that ISKCON right now is that not that we're not attracting the Indian Americans, American Indian. My son's crying. We're not attracting them, but we're actually repelling them.
Yeah. Is he okay? Do you want to take a pause?
Let me just look.
Yeah.
He's in his mother's arms.
Nice.
He's crying. But yeah, that's what I think. Anyway, this conversation. This has been great. I totally. This is what I wanted to talk about. Like, we should do this again with like Chaitanya Nanda.
Yeah. I feel like I know probably we're
coming up to time.
We're coming up to time. This last point, I think, yeah, like it's that part of my like, what happens when we get distracted from like asking the real questions and like having the real conversations and all of that. Part of that is also like, I really think that it's exactly as you're saying. It's not just like, why are we not attracting, XYZ certain demographic that, let's say, for whatever reason, which again, we can get even more into like why those reasons, but like for whatever reason, we really value this demographic and we're not attracting them. But like even more deeply, yeah, like what are those things that actually are like problem areas? What are those things that are like, right? Like that people are coming to Krishna consciousness, not because of what we're doing, but even like, I would say in spite of what we're doing. Right?
Wow. Great point.
I mean, that it's heavy, but can we have enough kind of courage, and can we make sanghas that are safe enough where we can really ask ourselves those questions and like be real with ourselves and not worry about like, well, I don't want to say something offensive and this is the way ISKCON always did it, and this is what Prabhupada said and what Prabhupada did. I'm not trying to discount what Prabhupada said or did, but I'm also, I think I would like to see us pushing, forward in like examining some of that stuff with a little bit of objectivity and a little bit of kind of what they sometimes call critical reflexivity, right? The ability to like self-critique, to be like, what does an outsider hear when they hear this? I may hear Prabhupada or so-and-so saying this, and I may contextualize it and I may accept it and I may even appreciate it.
Right.
What is the other person hearing?
I agree with that. But I also don't want to take it too far. Some people take it too far where it's like way too much, like looking at what the other person's hearing way too much, that it becomes something else than what it was meant to be. Like it's morphed into something that's completely different from what it originally was, which I don't think is right.
Yeah.
I think that we do need to cater. Even that word is kind of weird. I think we do need to like make it so it's acceptable or comfortable or whatever to people, but at the same time, not
relevant also.
That's relevant, but at the same time, not change it too much that we're like giving up ourselves, like giving up our identity as ISKCON devotees, Prabhupada's movement.
Sure. Yeah, and it's a larger topic, right?
Oh yeah, that's a topic in itself.
Maybe we can talk, in more detail about that. I would love to have a little bit more of a. I feel like we're just like with so much, like with so many things. I feel like we're so aligned.
Yeah.
That it's beautiful, and it's like I love you so much. Like it's wonderful to have that kind of connection, that friendship with you. That like even goes beyond our like in-law relationship through through Krishnangi. But also, it's like really fun when we don't see eye to eye. And like,
yeah, of course, 100%.
I would really, really love to explore that.
Yeah.
Let me just put this out there, just maybe even as a teaser. And it's something I've been actually reflecting on a lot these days. I agree with you in terms of like, that there's something troubling and there's something very even, I'll even say scary about this kind of like, morphing the message into something else to accommodate, to please, to win praise or whatever, or to avoid criticism. What I've been reflecting on lately, and it's a little rough, so it's going to sound a little stream of consciousness here. But often when that happens, I think when you scratch a little bit like more, when you dig a little bit deeper and scratch beneath the surface, often the problem that's happening there is someone is taking, let's say, like in this case, since we sort of started it, let's say like Prabhupada, like someone is taking, a very heavy statement that Prabhupada makes, let's say, right? And that person is taking that statement and going like, oh, what do I do to this? How do I like disguise this? How do I like smooth it out and like, right? Like, how do I mess with this so it's like socially acceptable and so I can like dodge a bullet, right? And I think we've all, like, if we're being honest with ourselves, maybe we've all been in situations where like a part of us, maybe we're kind of doing that because we do have to dodge bullets sometimes, right? Or it feels that way.
Yeah.
I feel like that's qualitatively and energetically very, very different and therefore produces a very different outcome than when someone approaches it like, here is this statement, here is this wisdom. I'm going to hear it. I am going to internalize it. I'm going to assimilate it. I'm going to chew on it. I'm going to ruminate. I'm going to really try to like figure out not just, I'm going to try to avoid either extreme. One extreme being Prabhupada said it, it's true, Jai Hari Bol, end of story, turn off mind, turn off intelligence, right? Hey, in some circles, that's considered like the process. Ain't working for me anymore, right? Like,
right.
I'm not just going to turn off critical faculty. And I don't want to expect other people to do that either. So that's one extreme. I'm going to avoid that extreme. I'm also going to avoid the extreme of like, reading these statements only with my head, only with my my academic hat on. I'm going to like avoid that temptation to like deconstruct the hell out of it and just, right? I'm going to try to find that space of like reading it with my mind, my intelligence, but also with my heart.
Yes.
What does Krishna want to tell me in this moment? What is Krishna empowered Srila Prabhupada to speak in this?
Yeah.
Where do I agree and align? Where is there some dissonance? Where is that dissonance coming from? That's hard work. I'm not saying it's easy. But when we do that, right, and the sort of the classical Vedantic terminology for that is called mananam.
Mananam, yeah.
So it starts with shravanam. When we take that shravanam, that hearing or reading, and then we go into that space of mananam, we're doing that like ruminating, right? Satchidananda Swami likes to talk about how it's like chewing, right? Digesting, chewing. Like digestion begins in chewing your food, right?
Yeah.
So it's like chewing on it, digesting it on all these different levels. And then there's an even deeper level in Vedanta called nididhyasanam. And nididhyasanam it's explained in different ways by different teachers, but essentially my understanding at least is it's a kind of like going from like that mananam of like deep introspection and like ruminating on it to like, what am I supposed to do with this? What is the essence of this that I can then apply in my life, right? Like, how is this going to show up for me? How can it show up for others? When we go through that process, I don't know if I'm convinced, but at least my strong feeling is when we go through that process, then when it's our time to share it with someone else, to speak it in a class, to articulate it, to write it, to post it on social media, whatever, whether it's something as seemingly casual as a Facebook update, or whether it's like, literally publishing books and everything in between, we're going to be able to do that in a way that is more likely to speak to people where they are, to touch hearts, which like that is what bhakti is supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And it's a whole other conversation, but like I am firmly convinced that if we're not touching hearts, if we're not connecting on the heart level, we're doing something that looks like bhakti and that sounds like bhakti, but is not bhakti proper. And I think there's some shastric sort of foundation for that. But I think that will happen. It will happen in a way that is attractive to thoughtful people, that is resonant and relevant to thoughtful people, that is not sort of overlaid with so much stuff that's going to like scare them away, and that is going to maintain the integrity and is not going to like water it down, diminish it, sanitize, whatever.
Very well put.
If that's not happening, that shravanam, mananam, nididhyasanam, if that's not happening, I think we ought to ask ourselves, why isn't that happening? Right? Because instead, sometimes, unfortunately, what happens is we go from shravanam to like we go like shravanam, katanam, pastanam, right? And either we are, depending on our own sort of ideological inclination, and I know we have mutual friends who fit in both of these camps, and some of them like freaking kill each other on Facebook and like, right? They're like, God, brother, it's like the Mahabharata, like, like
I'd like to bring all those devotees on. We can talk about it.
You like that stuff. I get a little queasy when I see like the arrows being fired at each other. Right. But like, but often what happens is, depending on either if we're like, like whatever, like, like Vishnu Das, like hypotheticals, right? Pseudonyms. If we're Vishnu Das and our inclination is to be a little bit more on the liberal side, a little bit more on the like social justice side, a little bit more on the, then what we're going to do, if we're not doing the, shravanam, mananam, nididhyasanam, if we're not doing that, then our inclination is going to be, I still want to cut and paste this.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to have to like figure out how to do this in a way that like, I'm going to like kind of massaged to get Prabhupada to be the kind of Prabhupada that I want, like the Prabhupada 2.0. And then it's like Prabhupada was like a social justice, like, you know, like he was the incarnation of social justice, you know.
Yes.
And it's like, well, you know, kind of, it's a stretch, right? It's like, but like I'm gonna project my own thing.
Yes.
Or if I'm, give me another name, not Vishnu Das, but
Krishna Das.
if I'm Krishna Das, very creative. If I, this is what happens at the end of the pod. You're like, shut up already. Like we're past the hour mark. Okay. If I'm,
We're actually an hour 45, but
holy, are you kidding me?
yeah, it's cool.
Wow. All right. Sorry, everyone.
Sorry, but no, it's not sorry. People are listening still.
If we're on that Krishna Das side, that maybe our own, for whatever reason, our own inclination, our own ideology, our own nature, right? Sometimes it's just like our personalities.
Yeah.
If we're more in that, like, you know, like
Conservative.
say it loud, say it proud, or conservative, or pushing back against, right? Or even like I have friends who I don't think are conservative, but they're also like contrarians.
Yeah.
So because like the sort of like right now the left is so like amped up and like kind of like you know for some good reasons and some kind of wonky reasons also.
Yeah.
I have these friends or like, you know, kind of like acquaintances who are like, just to be contrarians, just to be like, for the sake of like, to play devil's advocate, they're like, well, actually, no, like Jordan Peterson, blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
So, but depending on where we land, either we're going to do that cutting and pasting in that social you know, reforming and, you know, kind of on the sly hiding things and, you know, doing whatever to like project this picture of Bhakti and of Prabhupada in that way. Or we're going to like go out of our way to be like, I'm going to give you the straight talking Prabhupada with the sledgehammer. And that's like my, you know, it's like Prabhupada smashing. I heard this class the other day.
I'm more on that side, by the way.
You know where I'm landing. I'm more with my my buddy Vishnu Das over here. Where... No, I'm serious.
I freaking love this, man. But see, we can't hate we don't hate each other. Like, I mean, we're related, but at the same time, like, I don't think Vishnu Das and Krishna Das hate each other. I think it's like, they might disagree and it may come off that they hate each other, but like, let's look at me and you. I might not agree with you on what you're saying from this side, and I'm on this side and I'm proud of this side, but it doesn't mean I have to like personally like hate you or block you or defriend you or whatever it is, you know? And that's a whole separate topic. But.
Yeah. But you see what I'm saying? And you know, that's why I wanted to use Vishnu Das and Krishna Das rather than like actual people, because like I'm trying to like just talk about at their worst. Right?
Yeah, at their worst. Yeah.
At their worst, whatever side of the ideological or, you know, sociological divide you're at, as a substitute for, and again, this is like a working theory in progress. So like, if someone wants to shoot it down, like be my guest, whatever.
Yeah.
But my at least like working theory of it is, whatever side of the divide, you know, you happen to feel drawn to, if we're not always endeavoring from like in a very rigorous, heartfelt, like keeping it real sense to do the hard work of Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam over and over again. If we're not doing that before we sit down to the keyboard, before we sit down to the Vyasasana or the podcast mic or whatever to speak, chances are it's going to be more of that Vishnu Das, Krishna Das side of the story than it is going to be, you know, what, and here I will use real names, what speaks to me so much about Radhanath Swami and his presentation of Krishna consciousness, about Sachinandan Swami and his presentation of Krishna consciousness, about devotees like Radhika Raman Prabhu or Radha Dasi, or I mean, so many, Rukmini Devi, so many who I feel like it's just so apparent in when they speak, when they approach a topic, even if on that particular point I walk away going, I see it a little bit differently. It doesn't happen often.
But they've internalized it, they've ruminated on it, and then they're expressing it.
And what they're expressing is coming so much from that place of like Vigyan.
Yes.
That like, even if the details, like I'm sure if you sat me and Radhika Raman Prabhu down, like we might find certain places where shastrically or sociologically or, you know, personal, whatever, we might disagree. But like, my gosh, I will, and I'm specifically using him as an example because I think he does this so well. I will so much respect and appreciate and be grateful for you know, the realness of his presentation of, you know, Krishna consciousness, of Prabhupada. Like, I'll be just totally, I mean, I've already said so much on this podcast that like at this point, either you need to ban the whole thing, you need to like censor the whole thing, or we're just going to like...
Dandavat still won't share it.
I don't even... Is Dandavat... I see you say that, but I don't know if I can't tell if you're like being like sarcastic in that millennial way. Does Dandavat still exist? Like, I don't know this for a fact. I think you're like teasing me.
I'm not teasing you. Growing up, Dandavats was like the gold standard for ISKCON news. And I just want to be on it so bad. And they won't share it because I'm not wearing a tilak. And now I'm not wearing dhoti.
Well, have you made ISKCON News? The ISKCON News website?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Well, as one of the... I'm proud to say, for better or for worse, I was part of the team that you know, when I was doing communications work, that helped to start what would eventually become ISKCON News.
Really?
We were going to call it ISKCON News Weekly at a certain point. It's all sorts of interesting history there.
Nice.
I was envisioning it as like Time Magazine, but that got shot down. Anyway, but I think you're doing all right if ISKCON News is reporting it. And
I want to be on
folks,
either Sampradai. It keeps saying like
Sampradai Scum, I think is what it's called, right?
Sampradai Sun, Chakra, or Dandavats.
I believe the correct pronunciation is chakra.
Chakra.com.
If we're trying to be more Western in our approach, I believe it should be chakra.com.
Oh man. Okay.
And you know, like you're on point when like you get Nam so like genuinely in a tizzy that he doesn't like know like which button to press on
No, dude, I've been doing that.
He's gone back and forth between like the X-Files one and like the candle after.
I've been doing that. Okay.
But
we have to end.
Oh my gosh. No, we're just getting started, Nam. We're just getting started.
Listen, you say before we started, you said, "Oh, I don't know when I'm gonna come back," and this and that. Dude, you're gonna come back. Let's just be real.
All right, Krishna willing.
I thought you were gonna say Krishna West. Krishna willing.
Krishna willing. I would love to do this again if your listeners will have me, if you'll have me.
Totally. We'll have Vishnu Das and Krishna Das.
Put me right in the middle. It's rough, man. I'm not like...
I'm laughing about it because... Anyway, we'll talk offline about it. I think it's funny.
Fair enough.
I don't take much seriously anyways, so... But anyways, thank you. Let's do quick fire round because I know you wanted to do it.
Okay, let's do it. For the
Favorite
3
book.
people who are still listening.
I know,
It's
right?
for you.
Favorite book? Right now.
Favorite book right now? Living Name, Satchidanand Swami.
Nice. What's in your bag right now? And if you don't have a bag, if you did have a bag.
Bead bag, notebook, and a pen that looks like this. I'm obsessed with these Pilot pens now.
The one you could see the what is it called? The ink reservoir. You can see it.
Yes.
Yeah. Favorite movie of all time?
My favorite movie of all time is probably this Bollywood flick called Anand. That is not like a typical Bollywood movie. It's an old movie that is an Amitabh Bachchan like fan favorite. It's kind of where he maybe like really blossomed into like the superstar that he is, and just tells this beautiful story of a friendship that I just love.
Nice. If your house was burning down and you could only get 3 things, what would you take?
Krishangi, Shruti, and Mom, probably. Like, thank God I only have like 1 kid, because that'd be like a Sophie's Choice kind of deal right there.
Oh my God, that's funny.
You know, there are a bunch of listeners who are like, what about his deities?
I know, right?
It's not a fair question, but okay.
I just did a podcast with a devotee like 2 days ago, and they asked me that, and I said deities. I said some Prabhupada books that I have and my bead bag. I didn't say my family. I guess I didn't think of. I did anyway.
Nice.
Wonk, wonk, wonk.
No, it's because like I'm an impersonalist, so I think of my family members as things, but you recognize that they are people that have their own
eternal spirit souls.
Eternal spirit souls that can find their own way out of the fire. Krishna will inspire them from within.
Oh my God, that's so funny. All right, that's up with a quick fire round.
Okay.
VBD, thank you so much, man.
Thank you,
I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
I love
this. Is good conversation.
Such an honor, man. Such an honor. And I mean that. I know I tease sometimes, but like it's been amazing to see how you've blossomed and how the whole podcast has blossomed. I know a lot of really amazing people in my life, and I just know of others who who are getting so nourished by this. It's like
Really?
it's a way for them to connect and as you said, to kind of keep it real. And that's such a gift that you're giving to so many.
Thank you.
So
Appreciate it.
just to be a part of it, man, it's a blessing.
Thank you. If someone wants to get in touch with you, Facebook?
Not really. I'm kind of rethinking my whole like,
Instagram?
connection to Facebook. I'm
Email?
Yeah, email's good.
Okay. Well, let's do it this way. If someone wants to contact you, they should write to me personally.
WhatsApp.
Let's give me your WhatsApp number.
I'm turning into like every like uncle from India. Like, I will send you so many forwards. Like, COVID cures coming your way. Like,
Oh my gosh.
no, in all seriousness, I'm I don't know, man. I'm happy to be in touch with folks who want to be in touch, but I'm also like wary about like I don't just sort of like add people on Facebook who I haven't really met in person and have a relationship with.
If they,
I'm just not on social media generally.
But what I'm getting at is that sometimes my guests they say things that really resonate with someone and they want to like tell you, or they want to say, hey, this is my story and thank you for saying that, or some appreciation or even criticism of what you're saying, or challenges or whatever.
For sure.
So if you want to get in touch with VBD, message me personally or put it in the comments.
Absolutely. I think that's the best way of doing
and
it.
VBD will be reading the comments as well. But thank you, everyone. This is episode 28. We've hit an hour and 55 minutes. I don't think we've ever gone this long before with any of podcasts.
You might have to split this or something.
No. It's going to be the whole thing on, man. This is unfiltered, real talk, the late morning program with Namras. I'll leave you with Vishnu John Swami. Thanks.
Thank you.